Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about the devil archetype. I've actually wanted to do this video for quite some time now. And I've recently, with my experiences with the wild woman archetype, my view of the devil archetype has shifted slightly, especially now I see a link between the devil and the strength card. So I know the devil is traditionally associated with the lovers. It's why the classic Rider-Waite-Smith imagery actually depicts the lovers card within the devil card. Sorry, I should say the lovers. the lovers are depicted within the devil card. And it is also a 6, like the lovers. The number 15, which is the major arcana card for the devil, it's the number 15. If you add 1 plus 5, you get 6, which makes it a 6. So I did want to preface that I do understand that, but I do see that there is actually a link between the devil archetype and the strength archetype. I also want to preface that the way I see strength has also shifted, and the way that I've been interacting with that energy, as well as how I see people who really embody the strength archetype. I actually have somebody very near and dear to me who is represented by the strength card. The strength card always comes forward to signify her. So I also see that energy differently now that I've been working with the wild woman archetype. So you will see me looking down throughout the video. I do have my notebook here, my previous journal here. A lot of my significant ruminations on the devil archetype are within this journal. And I will be showing you some imagery of some of my favorite devil cards, as well as strength cards. So the devil archetype I associate with fertility, horned figures, and there's a deep connection to nature, instincts, primal instincts particularly, strength and resilience, as well as the wild. It's deeply connected with the outsider, and it is associated with repression and liberation. So when I always think about the devil archetype, I always think of the myth of Dionysus, which I think is a great myth to connect with if you're trying to connect with this archetype. The myth of Dionysus, and Dionysus is sometimes depicted with horns, and I do believe that Dionysus is a face of the devil archetype. You can certainly work with him in that aspect. And he has a very interesting domain. It overlaps significantly with Persephone. So you'll see and come to understand when you work with him and his myth that a lot of what he is associated with overlaps with Persephone. He's a very fascinating archetype and god to research and look into. Very, very interesting. So I always think about him, and I always believe, or I always look back at the myth, and how the ancient Greeks did not recognize him as either a god or their god. So there are some versions of the myth that did recognize him as a god, but they saw him as an outsider. They didn't believe that he was their god. And there are myths where they didn't believe that he was a god at all. Sorry, I'm still a bit congested. You'll probably hear that in my voice. So they saw him as an outsider, when in fact he wasn't just a god, he was actually their god. They didn't want to accept that Dionysus represented aspects of their society. It was aspects that they didn't want to recognize or see as a part of their society. So to me, the devil often will show up during times, difficult times, to represent deep-rooted issues within a structure or a system and how it functions. So oftentimes I will pull the Devil card if I'm encountering a situation and it's been structured or built a certain way that it has like it's deeply dysfunctional. There's like a deep issue within how society is structured, or any type of system, any type of foundation, if there's some sort of an issue with it. I like to think of it as a crack within the foundation. The Devil can be used symbolically as counterculture to free yourself of life and the patriarchal restraints. You guys know I don't like the word patriarchy. I think it's a buzzword. I know that it really does bring up a lot of intense feelings for a lot of people, so I typically will use the word society instead of the patriarchy. But I do think that it can represent returning to your roots and to nature. They operate outside of the parameters of the patriarchy or society, and thus they are viewed as outsiders. To me, the wild woman archetype appears with horns and sometimes wolves, deer, wildcat. She herself is very similar to the Devil archetype, in my opinion. Oftentimes, these beings that are horned or gods, if you look at some horned gods such as Pan, or Cernunnos, they are deeply linked to fertility and to nature. And in the ancient Greek world, anything that they're gods, I guess you could say, that were associated with nature, often depicted outside in nature and forests or horned, they were oftentimes viewed, because they viewed nature as wild. They viewed it as something untamable and uncontrollable, whereas the ancient Greeks saw their city in a very opposite light. They saw it associated with masculinity, logic, sophistication, and a lot of their city gods, I guess you could say, the gods that are associated with consciousness, which is another closely linked association to the city. It's associated with masculine energy, the consciousness, whereas feminine energy is closely linked to the subconscious. To me, the wild woman archetype reminds me of a simpler time, simpler life before we were expected to adhere and conform to the small box, the limited roles that the patriarchy has for us women and men. I feel that the times have shifted. It's become less about gender roles, at least in my experience, and it's become more about classism, the hierarchy, and the divide between the poor and the rich. Another significant rumination I had in connection with this archetype is I was able to kind of root it back to a very early experience that I had as a child. Growing up in the environment that I grew up with, it was incredibly chaotic and abusive. In elementary school, while I was still a child, I did break down and I started bawling in class. And I remember a lot of my peers at the time, they very much were very uncomfortable with my emotion. And I feel like this is another significant indicator of what the Devil card or the Devil energy can represent. It's this feeling of being an outsider, or behaving or acting outside of the norm. Anything that isn't considered normal, normal behavior for you to be doing. So me, as a child, crying, just randomly crying, in the middle of class, it was considered bizarre behavior. It wasn't standard behavior. It wasn't really seen as something that you should be doing in class, right? So they certainly thought that something was wrong. It could have been genuine concern. However, I do feel that there is some sort of a subconscious teaching that our instincts, emotions, and intuition is considered less than in regards to logic, rationality. There is definitely a preference for logic and reason, rationality over emotions or displays of emotion. A lot of people find emotion very uncomfortable. And you can oftentimes be labeled as crazy, emotional, or even irrational when you tend to give in to your emotions. So that's another significant teaching of the wild woman archetype. This archetype really connects you back, as well as the devil. It connects you to these instincts, your emotions, your primal instincts, your intuition, these things that past societies before we joined society as it is now in modern times, we really did rely heavily on our instincts. They kept us alive. So these archetypes are really great for reconnecting and realigning these things. But anytime you act outside of the norm, you are viewed as an outsider. Our emotions and instincts are valuable. They're part of who we are, and sometimes they can tell us that something is wrong or even dangerous. And I understand that we sort of forget that. We're used to living in this modern society where maybe your experience is different, but for me, I have certainly had dangerous experiences. I've been followed. It's not uncommon or even unheard of to have these types of experiences, but for the most part I've lived pretty safely. I could walk down my street without really feeling any concern, particularly during the daylight, which is another conversation to have. I've had friends. I have a very close friend from South Africa who had a very different experience growing up. But for the most part, I do feel like society has sort of removed our need for our primal instincts, or at least has taught us that. There are certainly times in our lives where we need these instincts. We need these. There are dangerous experiences in life. But for the most part, I felt that we're sort of taught that our instincts are wrong. Logic and rationale comes first, and then everything else sort of comes after that. It's definitely more valued in society, isn't it? So there is an argument there. And then there's also the notion that people that are more in touch with their primal instincts they're oftentimes viewed as barbaric. I could say other words as well, but I want to be respectful. Animals, children, and even women are still viewed as less than in other parts of the world. Even in some parts of our society and culture, there is an argument there. Animals don't really have rights. Same with children. The ancient Greeks viewed the city as a place of logic, sophistication, and consciousness, and the masculine, whereas nature and the natural world were associated with the wild, uncontrollable, subconscious, feminine, and even barbaric at times. These concepts are still prevalent in today's society. So Catholicism and Christianity took the image of the horned god. They took the image of the horned god. Gods like Pan or Cernunnos, and they used it to create their devil. So, And this video, I'm not talking about Satan. I don't work with Satan, so I feel like I'm not really qualified to discuss the figure of Satan. I'm just speaking about the devil archetypally, which I should have said in the beginning, but I didn't. But they basically adopted their version of the devil. And the devil can certainly be worked with to represent repression or repressed aspects of ourselves that we consider barbaric, things that we don't want to see about ourselves. And this energy is excellent for bringing them to the consciousness. This devil, the archetype and the card can certainly represent your shadow self, or like, again, aspects of yourself that you don't want to see, aspects of yourself that you don't like about yourself, or things that you're unaware of. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It can be positive things as well. And that's how I like to interact with the word shadow. But oftentimes it's urges and instincts of the flesh. And they're to be accepted as they're a part of the experience. A lot of the teachings of the Catholic and Christian faith is to ignore the physical, to ignore the flesh. But that's not really why we're here. The flesh and the physical is very much a part of the experience. You have to explore these aspects of yourself in order to be whole. And I'm using these words carefully. My work with the wild woman archetype has become it's become like really exploring these aspects, which I've discussed on the channel. I'll probably continue to discuss it. And it has certainly shifted how I view and interact with the strength energy in the archetype. I see strength people as being in touch with their wild side, and they can harness their sexual energy to create. The devil represents, again, repressed aspects of ourselves. It can shed light on how we view society and in turn how we view ourselves, as if these concepts are linked. It can represent deep-rooted issues within our society, the cracks in foundation, if you will. So when we connect with this archetype, we are reaching for shadow aspects of ourselves, and we're bringing them into union to achieve wholeness. The Phantasmagoria was able to really connect some of the missing dots, because I kept feeling this link with the Strength card and the Devil card. So according to the Ian Daniels in the Phantasmagoria guidebook, so if you're new to tarot, he created a fantastic guidebook. You can, I believe that unfortunately the deck is out of print, but you used to be able to purchase his, oh my gosh, I forgot what the deck is called. Is it Tarot Vampire? I can't remember. I'm so sorry. I'm drawing a blank for some reason. I will put it on the screen. But he created this deck that comes with this incredible guidebook. Unfortunately, it is out of print right now, but if you have it laying around, it's incredible. So he connected the dots, and that's the mastering of our emotions and animal instincts allows our true strength to flourish. It's not a matter of fighting or repressing these forces, but accepting them. People who are ruled by strength see difficult emotions as potential creative energy. I think there is a transmutation to creative energy. So that's just a personal rumination there. The devil connects us to our primal and animal impulses and can represent these aspects of ourselves that are out of balance and repressed. It is our initiation to dive into our shadow. Strength, however, represents mastery over primal instincts. It's when we bring these aspects into the light and accept them as parts of who we are, bringing them back into union through acceptance. I do think that I had this sort of push to purchase the Lioness Tarot and Oracle deck. It's an independently produced deck that I've heard has very strong Leo energy. So Leo is the zodiac trump card of strength. So sorry, I forgot to show you card imagery as I was gonna go over the archetype. I'm so good at this. But it apparently has very strong Leo energy, and Leo again is the zodiac trump card of strength. So there is a connection there. And the Lioness Tarot, it has a lot of these wildcat imagery. So I felt like it's also excellent for working with the wild woman archetype. So I do have to admit that I'm starting to see strength as being more of a representation of the wild woman archetype. So I'm sort of kind of linking the two of them together. And time will tell if I continue to see this energy in this light as I continue to keep working with this archetype. Of course, my opinion could change. But I've been really enjoying working with this archetype. As you can see, it's really changing how I see and interact with some of the energies that I interact with every day. They're part of my life. Just my mind is blown just working with this archetype. An incredible eye-opening experience. So I did want to go over some of the decks that I've been really enjoying connecting with the wild woman archetype as well as the devil archetype. So I do have some imagery here from the Goddess of Love Tarot. I do enjoy working with this archetype. There is nudity in the deck, but I do enjoy working with this deck for this archetype. As I've mentioned in length on my channel about this deck, I see it as being excellent if you're really struggling with self-confidence or self-love and acceptance. It's a very loving and accepting deck. Excellent for connecting with our true desires, our passions, like our instincts in that sense, sexual sovereignty, really accepting your power in that sense. So it's excellent for working with the devil archetype in that way, as well as strength. I do want to mention that I do see this video as being more on the devil archetype, but like I said, I do think that they are linked. So that's the Goddess of Love Tarot, and like I said, I do think that this is worth, if you have it in your collection, this is absolutely worth working with this archetype. I work with this deck with Lilith, who is an excellent deity to work with if you're looking for a deity to help guide you through the energy of this archetype. Of course, my favorite deck, the Witch Sister Tarot. There's a lot of fertility images, nature. There are a lot of horned figures. Nick Nevin, which is the High Priestess card. She's holding up a deer with horns, like a skull. There's a lot of horned there's I believe the 8 of Stones. I know this deck like the back of my hand. I can close my eyes and picture the cards. The 8 of Stones is like a goat woman. So there are a lot of horned, look at this, like there's a lot of horned figures within this deck. It's excellent for really tapping into your primal instinctive energy. The deck itself is very raw, it's very wild in its energy, very element of earth and fire. I've also spoken in length about this deck on the channel, so I will spare you further, but I do think that it's an excellent deck for connecting with the devil archetype, or the horned god, I should say. A newer one in my collection is the Tarot of the Huntress. So I have been working with Artemis in connection with the Wild Woman archetype, and this is a very raw, powerful, primal deck as well. It's very wild. There's a lot of animal and nature depictions throughout the deck. It's excellent for connecting with what's wild within you as well. And connecting with faces of deity that are connected with those wild energies. Pan, Dionysus, Artemis. I even had Lilith come through with this deck. She really wanted me to do a reading with her with this deck, which shocked me. The Darkwood Tarot. There are actual devils depicted in this deck, but it also has that it has that liminal autumnal energy to it. Perfect for connecting with this archetype in its underworld face or aspect. When you're really ready to dive into your shadow, this deck is an excellent companion for that. There's, like I said, there's horned devil-like beings. Within the deck. Another one that I think is worth mentioning as well, excellent for really diving into your shadow, is the Horror Tarot. So if you have that one in your collection, I would say give it a go. I don't think I'm going to show you every single deck. The Horror Tarot is another one that was illustrated by Abigail Larson, the creator of the Darkwood Tarot that I just showed you. So there's a lot of devil-like beings within that deck. And to me, it really aligns with our shadow selves. It's excellent for doing shadow work. So I do find that that deck would be an excellent companion for this type of work as well. The Wild Unknown Tarot. I haven't mentioned this deck in so long. This was way back on the channel, towards the very beginning. This was one of my favorite decks. I used it all the time. This is a very, it's a dark, very wild, primal deck. Excellent for doing shadow work again. So this deck, at least for me, it likes to talk about shadow work related things. You might not consider working with this deck with this archetype, but I think that it's worth giving it a shot. This is the Laputan Oracle. There is nudity in this deck, but I think that it's excellent for really assisting with in helping you connect with what's wild within you. Aspects of yourself that you don't want to see. The beast within us. And great for really bringing these things back into union, or at least so that you're conscious of them. You can start working towards that. And another new one in my collection is the Wildwood Tarot. This deck I specifically purchased to connect with the Devil archetype. So there's a lot of caveman energy. It's very raw, primal, connects you with societies that existed way before how our society, our modern society, is structured. Back when we had to be more connected with our primal and survival instincts. This deck is excellent for connecting with those aspects of ourselves and our ancestors, connecting us with even previous versions of ourselves before we incarnated into who we are today. And as well as our ancestors, connects us to the spirits of land, the land that we walk on, nature. It's an excellent deck for connecting with this archetype. So that is all I wanted to share. Like I said, I've really wanted to talk about this archetype for quite some time now. And I'm just so thankful that I got to share it with you all today. I do want to create, I'm thinking of doing a fun video. I want to do like my favorites, favorite decks, makeup, candles, and possibly some other things, but maybe like, I don't know, a winter favorites. I know it's not technically winter yet, but I mean, let's face it, we're pretty much in winter. It's been very cold here in Canada, so I feel like that transition has already happened quite a while ago now. So I don't know, I'm thinking of doing like a favorites type of video. I might film that tomorrow if I'm feeling a little bit better. Practically losing my voice here, so if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.